Okay, so when we last were working in Premiere, we had BTS Final is probably showing up in your timeline. What we want to do is go to your project panel, and if you need to make it a little bit bigger, I'm still in the audio workspace from last week, so I'm just going to pull this down. At least in theory, I'm going to. Come on, Brenda. Huh?
Just crushed it. That's literally what was happening to me all last week.
And there's no point in trying my computer because it can't run.
Do you want to try another workstation? There's only, to be honest, there's a couple of things. So if you, kind of want to watch and practice, look over somebody's shoulder. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is make this window a little bit bigger, and it's not even cooperating with that. Okay, what we want to do is what we've been doing all along. We are going to work with basics of color correction. Usually we make another version. Okay, I guess not. We're just going to work on this BTS Final here. It's named 06 up here. This is the edit that we're working on. We are going to do some basics of color correction. So if you think of this as Photoshop, but for movies, we can do a lot of the same things we do in Photoshop as far as white balance, warming up colors, actually you can do some masking to have colors only in certain areas, or we can do black and white or fade in, fade out, that type of thing. So there's lots of different things that we can do. In Adobe, the first thing we want to do is go into the color workspace, so up here at the top middle, and if you get this warning, say okay to that. In the color, can you not get that either? Go into the color workspace first and see.
So you just want to send like
Color. Nope, go into the workspace that's called color. Click right in the middle here. So this is a new workspace. You can see over on the right-hand side we have different things that we've seen before. And up in our source panel, we also have some new options. One is called Lumetri Scopes. So if you want to click on that, and if you don't have it, go under Window and turn a check mark on in front of Lumetri Color and Lumetri Scopes. Okay?
Wait, como se what?
Como se ha?
Sorry.
Do you have Lumetri Scopes? Okay.
Okay. And then are we supposed to have certain files left?
Not yet.
Okay.
Nope.
Did you get to Lumetri?
Oh, you're in
If it's not in this source panel as an option, go to your window up here and choose check marks in front of Lumetri Scopes. So in the book, it's talking about using this YC color form and a waveform. So unfortunately, that doesn't exist the way it talks about it in the book. In the book on page 300, it talks about, we just changed our color, or our workspace to be the color workspace, that's fine. Then it's saying that at the bottom right of the interface, you should see a reference monitor. Nope. It's now at the top left. And this whole Lumetri scope is not an option. If we click on a wrench down here, it says to click on this wrench. Actually, it's going to work now because I got this Lumetri open. Before it wasn't working. So if you're in Lumetri Scopes up here, at the bottom right, there is a wrench. Click on that, and then we see waveform types, and we see YC. So the YC waveform, that's the one that we want to look at. Why you would use this is if you're actually going to use your video on TV. So for broadcast standards, it has to fit inside certain parameters. And I believe it's like a 7.5, it says right in your book, up to 100. This waveform can't go above 100 or it won't work or be allowed on broadcast TV. So the bright objects, the bright blue areas at the top of the graph, the darker objects produce a waveform towards the bottom. So brightness is up here, darkness is down here. And it's basically the luminance of all of your shots. And we know what luminance is from Photoshop. It's like a brightness factor, right? It has to fit in a certain brightness zone to be allowed on broadcast safe TV. So that's something that we're looking at, and it needs to stay. The chroma values should be the same and distributed evenly across the 7 to 100 range, 7.5. So we see that we have these values all throughout. This is something that we're just going to peek at every now and then, but this whole video falls in these ranges. It's safe. It's nothing we need to tweak. And unless you're doing something for broadcast TV, it's not something you'd necessarily even have to think about. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some color corrections using the three-way color corrector. So the first thing we want to do is get to interview Jeff. So that's that very first one at the start of our video. So down in your timeline, get to the very beginning. And if you need to zoom in a little, interview Jeff is the one that we want to start with. And if you look at this image on your screen, what kind of a color cast do you think you see? A little yellowish, probably. Like, we don't know if this is a beige wall or a white wall, but it looks a little yellowy and warm. So that's what we're assuming is going to happen. So we're going to take our selection tool, select the clip like we already did, and now we want to get our effects panel. So Shift number 7 should pull up the effects panel. I see Lumetri over here. I do not see my effects like I did before. Oh, here they are at the bottom. Cripes. Last time I looked at this panel was up here at the top right, I tell you. So the effects panel is now down in the lower left, at least for me. Is that where it showed up for all of you? Okay. If you know the name of the effect that you want to apply, you can type it into this search rather than guessing what subfolder it's in. So we're going to start typing in the word 3, and we're going to see the three-way color corrector under video effects. You guys see that right there? That's what we're going for. We're going to double click on it to apply that effect to this interview clip. And then we're going to X out of the search area so it doesn't have the word 3 anymore, so that we're cleared out of that search. Yep. Type in, are you down here in the effects panel? Type in the search the word 3, and then double click on the three-way option.
It's called three-way color corrector.
Yeah, three-way color corrector. Once you've double clicked on it, clear out your search because you don't want it to be there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Effect Controls panel, which is one of these up at the top left, one of the tabs, or it's Shift number 5 if you want to pull that up. But up here, Effect Controls is an option, so click on that. And we now see what's being applied to this clip. We have motion options, opacity options, and we have the three-way color corrector. Here it is right here. There's lots of things we can do, but these 3 dials, they might look a little confusing, but do you guys see shadow, midtones, highlights? Remember that from good old Photoshop days? Using the eyedropper to sample when we did color correcting? Seem familiar? Okay, Elliot, you look lost.
I'm very lost.
Okay, what's wrong? That brings up the effect controls.
We're good.
Okay,
We're back in business.
back in business. We have the effect controls panel up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these controls to balance the white balance of this clip. By double clicking on the three-way color corrector down in the effects thing, all we did was activate it. We didn't do any color correcting yet. It's still at its basic, this is our starting point. But we activated it, and it therefore shows up in our effect controls, and that's where we can run specifics with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the highlights eyedropper, just like we would in Photoshop. And we're going to click on something that should be a highlight. So up here in the bright wall somewhere, we're going to click. And that's going to sample, say this is what a white highlight should be. Then we're going to go to the mid-tone eyedropper. We're going to click on the mid-tone eyedropper. And we're going to sample one of these shadows underneath these wood boards behind his head. They should be a neutral gray without any color cast. And then we're going to click on the shadows eyedropper, and we're going to sample something that should be pure black. So maybe the inside of his coat down here by his stomach. Sample that.
It's crazy. Well, it makes it so crisp now.
Yeah, and it's very much like white balancing in Photoshop, right? What should be white, what should be neutral, what should be dark. But it's in video. So we did a good job. If you want to see what that was, go up to the Effect Control panel and click on the FX on and off to turn it on and off. And it's a subtle shift, but it takes out those yellow hues. So when you have the slash through it, it's turned off. and when you don't, it's turned on. So we've color corrected that first clip. All right, a few more interview clips need some color correcting too. So we could go about that process each time the way we just did, select the clip, apply it, yada yada, but we can actually do it with Command and Paste. So select the interview Jeff, if it still isn't, make sure you have that selected, and then do a Command C for copy. And then we're going to take our timeline playhead to the interview Philip point. So, interview Philip. There's Philly, this one. Take your playhead above the interview Philip, and then we're going to select that clip, and we're actually going to right-click on it. And from that option, we're going to choose the Paste Attributes, which is up towards the top here. So what that is saying is, okay, what attributes from the first clip do you want to apply? What? Oh, thank you. How about paste attributes instead? It looks almost exactly the same. So what is it that we want to copy? Do we want it to be the motion, the opacity? What is it in here that we want to actually copy from the first one? We want to, if it was checked, we'd want to uncheck everything except for the three-way color corrector. That's the only thing that we want to copy from it, and say OK. And what it did was, now we're on the Philip clip, and if we look at our effect control panel, here it is. All it did was apply the dashboard, if you will, of that color correction. But we can resample all these points, because not all of them are the same. This is not the exact same background, right? We don't have that wood fence and all that jazz. So from here, we are going to use the eyedroppers again. So I'm going to start with the highlight eyedropper. And the brightest point in this is probably the glare on this crossbar up here. So I'm going to sample that. A mid-tone sample point is again going to be a grayish hue. So maybe in his sweater, right around his neck, somewhere in here would be a good place to sample. And then a dark point to sample would be like the black t-shirt underneath right in here. So we sampled all three of those. The other thing that we have besides the shadow highlights and midtones is this input level thing. So this is kind of like in the histograms when things are too dark and we would pull this white thing in towards the mountains. Remember how we would do that? We don't see the histogram or know the mountains. But we can pull this white point to the left and visually improve it as well, brighten it up. They gave us a specific number, but in the real world you wouldn't know that. You would just start dragging to the left and notice how it's getting brighter and brighter. So what they want us to go to is 202. It's quite a bit brighter. Notice it's shifting, and it doesn't have to be exact, but somewhere in here. Notice that the midtones went with it, but it got a lot brighter. If you want to check if what you're doing is affecting the Lumetri scopes or that broadcast safe level, you could always pop back into this view just to make sure that everything still falls within these ranges. We're not going to worry about that because if you guys are producing video for broadcast standards, you have a lot more training in this class and you'll learn this on the job. And this video clip, everything works, so we're good. All right, so we brightened up that one. We're going to perform something similar on Dwight. We're going to copy and paste the effect. So with Philip still selected down here, up in our actual effect control panel, we're going to select the name three-way color corrector, so highlighted up here. This is another way of doing it. And do a Command C to copy. Then we're going to take our playhead up to Interview Dwight 2, which I believe is going to be one of the next clips. Yep, Interview Dwight 2. Select that clip. And then we're going to paste it, Command V. The first time we selected any and all attributes. So when we did it down here, we copied everything here, and then we had to say, ignore opacity, ignore this, ignore this. This time we just copied three-way color corrector and pasted that. So now we have that option with this clip. So we're going to sample a highlight on this one. And the highlight zone is going to be somewhere over here to the right of his head, where it's the brightest, or should be the brightest. The mid zone, midpoint, Maybe there's a shadow. Which one? The Rubik's Cube. This shadow that this thing is throwing is what they want us to sample here. Somewhere in here. And then the dark point that we can sample inside his collar, in here where it's dark. And then we're also going to use that slider on the input levels, and we're going to tweak that a little bit to be 193. So we're going to pull that to the left and brighten it up a little bit more also. So we took care of that clip. Now we're going to take our playhead to the next one in line, Interview Adam 1. Select that clip. And we're going to do a paste again because it's still got our color corrector in memory. So that pasted in the color corrector for this particular one. And for the highlights, we're going to sample the wall off to the right of his head. And for the midpoint, we're going to sample this grayish area right behind his neck. And then for our shadow, we're going to do the inside of his collar too. And then we're going to change this one to an input level of 200. So we're going to pull it left, brighten this one up a little bit more as well. And then finally, we're going to pull our timeline ahead to Tyler, the next clip. This one's pretty yellow again. Once your clip is selected, we're going to do a Command V to paste in that color corrector again. And then we're going to do a whole reset on this one. So at the top left in our effect control panel, where we see the three-way color corrector, to the far right you see that back arrow that says reset the effect. So if you click that, it brings everything back to original starting points. So highlights, midtones, shadows, and our input levels are back to nothing. So from there, do you have a problem, or are you just color correcting weird?
No, just a serious error has occurred.
A serious error. So if you're still working with Tyler, we're going to click on the highlights, and the bright point for him is this white wall area behind here. Find the bright point. The midtones on this clip are somewhere in this neutral area above his hand. And the shadows in this clip are probably this black speaker monitor behind him. And then if you needed to, you could play around with the input. Whether you need to or not is up to you. And at this point, you can save. So File, Save. So that's simple white balancing. And if any of you shot under these fluorescent lights, you may have goofy color in your videos. You may have that yellowish look. So it's a simple three-way color corrector is that first part. All right, integrating color corrections into the R3D or the red footage, which is all that high-res 4K stuff. Remember, what did I tell you that camera, that R3D format is similar to what in photography? Tell you like an analogy. RAW. It's like camera raw. Everything is recorded. Remember how we brought pictures in camera raw and we're able to tweak anything and everything because it's all still there. So same idea here. A lot of dynamic exposure is there, so we have a lot to do. Or we have a lot to work with, not that we have to do it. We're going to give these red clips a distinct look in the documentary footage because that's when they're actually performing. And they're kind of like this 80s retro band that's kind of been the theme. So we're going to maybe do something to make that clip look a little different and not crisp and new, kind of like we've done other effects in here to make it look older. So we're going to work on those. Take your timeline playhead to the clip in video 3 that is the production music video raw R3D. I'm going to zoom out hopefully and try to find where that is towards the end. Also, I should point out in this version, because we're opening their stuff, there's some extra things on here that we aren't familiar with because we didn't make them. In that After Effects chapter, there was a whole bunch of information on doing an outro, which is the opposite of an intro. So if you see stuff that we've never done before, that would explain it. So the clip that we want is Prod Music Video Raw 01. Sorry, anybody find it? What number are we at? 226? Okay, so it's this one right here. All right. Select the clip. Make sure you have the clip highlighted in your timeline. And we're going to right-click on it. This is so stupid. I'm sorry I have to lead you through this. But nonetheless, we're going to right-click on it, and we're going to say Reveal in Project, which is down here. And all that's going to do is open up your project bin somewhere. Where did you go? Probably over here. Let's go to the project bin. Why didn't that work? Right-click, Reveal in Project. Did it show it to you in your project panel? Yeah, it did for me at home also. Basically, it should twirl open the R3D folder, right? And show you all of those high-res clips that we have available to us. All right. So in this R3D bin, in your project bin, which is in the lower left corner now, we're going to right-click on this Prod Music Vid Raw 01. Got to make my names bigger so I can see which one it is. We're going to right-click on that, and we're going to choose Source Settings from this pop-up. So it's up towards the top, and that's going to pop up a new window. Here it is, floating around. Source settings is right now. Mine didn't open either, but you have it selected. Try another one. Right there you go. That one works. Go to that clip. Just work on that clip with this. Anybody else have that happening? Okay, good. All right, what does this remind you of, this interface?
Bubbles.
Bubbles or curves? It's got, yeah, the curves for sure and the histograms. Things like saturation, contrast, brightness, white balance. Does this remind you of Adobe Camera Raw? When we would open up a RAW file? So it's very similar. This is opening, it's like Camera Raw for video clips, basically. So with this open, at the top left, we're seeing a video frame of the clip that we opened, so that's fine. A slider that allows you to scrub through the clip. So here's the slider. As we pull through it, notice that the histograms are bumping up and down. We have 4 histograms, RGB, red, green, blue, and the other one is the luminance or luma value, so that's the brightness value. And then we have a curves graph, which you guys know from doing curves in Photoshop, your highlights, your midpoints, your shadows, and you can tweak them, pull that up and down. So you can always manually grab onto this curve and pull. Notice that there's 4 different things we can be affecting. There's the luma, just the red, just the green, just the blue. So right now we're on the luma. And you can do it visually by clicking here and pulling around, or we can actually do it by number over here on the right. Do you guys remember in Photoshop when we did the color correcting all by channel? We went into every single red channel, green and blue, and tweak things. Same thing here. We're going to do it channel by channel. So, red, green, blue, blah, blah, blah. All right, under the color settings, so over here on the right-hand side, under color settings, which is about the 3rd thing down, we want to make sure that the gamma curve menu, the option right here for gamma curve, is red gamma 3. There's a whole bunch of them. If you're big into video, you're going to understand all this. I'm not. I'm going to follow the book, red gamma 3, and that was the default too for that matter. ISO menu. Drop down. Look at that. Just like in Camera Raw, we can tweak the ISO. So we're going to bump this bad boy up to 1600. Notice it get brighter. And what else happened to it? Just like with high ISO on film. Got a little grainy and noisy and icky. We actually like that because in this case it's supposed to be this old 80s type video that's not perfect and clean. We want to kind of rough it up. So we did it for that reason. All right, we're giving it the look of faster exposed film. All right, next under the curve settings. So we're down here and keep scrolling, curve. Make sure that the first channel that we're working on is Luma. Notice that we have red, green, and blue, so we're gonna go one by one through these, and we're gonna start with Luma. All of these, if you were to pull on these sliders and see what they did, it's a lot like Camera Raw, where you see things get darker, brighter, blacks get darker, blacks get brighter. We're going to type in some specific numbers, and as we do, you'll see this image changing, so you'll sort of understand it by that. So the first thing we want to look at is lights, Y, and it's set at 0.75. Click on that zone and type in 0.95, and then hit Tab. Don't hit Enter. It's the same as saying OK to this whole darn window, and it goes away. So either click away or just Tab. Then we're going to go down, and notice what happened on our curves. You see how it pulled that up high? It is similar to pulling that up to make that S curve. Now we're going to go into the darks Y, which is down a little further, and we're going to change that lower. Instead of 0.25, we're going to do 0.15. So we have that like S-shaped curve, which is kind of a typical curve that you put brighten your brights, darken your darks, keep your midpoints where they are. All we did though is change that for the Luma channel. So now we want to go back and switch to the red channel. Now you can see our red channel show up on the curves, and we want to do the same thing. So lights Y is 0.95, darks Y is 0.15, and that's going to make that red curve match the Luma. And guess what we're going to do for the next one? We're going to do the same thing for the green and the blue. What? The lights Y is 0.95 for all of them, and the darks Y is 0.15 for all three of the colors, and the Luma, so all four of them. So basically you're going through all of them one by one and changing these numbers. Or if you didn't know numbers or didn't want to play with the sliders, you could have done it over on the curves and pulled the curves up and down. So all three of them have this S-shaped light curve now. And before we say okay or move on, we like this. We like the look that it gave. Let's pretend we do like that. That was what we were going for. We're going to save it as a preset so that we can apply it to all four of the red clips without having to do this every time. So up at the top right, you guys see where it says Save Preset. I'll come back in just a second. Click Save Preset, and then we're going to give it a name. And just the way our book does, we're going to call it Poolside 01, because that's as confusing as we can get. And then say OK. It already exists, really? Okay. So I'm going to save it. And then finally, when we're done, we're going to say OK to this window. All right. Any glitches or problems? So you're going to click on this one. No, come on, got it. Lights Y, 0.95. And then go to darks Y and do 0.15. Right. Then you go to Luma and drop down to the next one, to red. Lights Y, and then got it. Darks Y. See, when you hit enter, that's what happens.
Yeah.
That's why you have to hit tab or just click away. So, you have to do that again in source. So, scroll down, it's going to in the reds, you got 0.95, and then darks Y is 0.5. Hit tab. Just up here, so go to drop down to green one, same way, and then I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just
to keep the kitchen clean.
Right.
It's just so hard.
Then, you know, so much here, click save it as a preset, and then call it Poolside. Okay. And then get them to do. Okay. Second.
Yeah, I can't stay up late.
Was up at 6 o'clock?
Exactly.
I got up at 5:30,
That's why I can't.
and I drank a lot of coffee. Okay, we applied that to that clip. We made a preset and we said, okay. All right, in our project panel over here, we did that to raw 01, but we still have 3 other raw clips, right? So we are going to marquee select those other 3, and then we're going to right click on any one of them, and we're going to choose, well, that didn't work. Let me get my marquee back. Right click, and we're going to do source settings again, and then we're going to go up to our preset, and we're going to say, how about that one we just made, Poolside 01? That's going to apply it to all of them, and we're going to say, okay. So all 4 of those had the same preset applied to them. All right. In your project panel, if by any chance you do have something in the search bar here, like R3D, I don't, but if you do, exit out so that our project panel shows everything and not just those. And we're going to do a save. So the next part of the book, again, is not the same wording or the same anything as it is in our book, but it's kind of cool. It's some of these special color effects and adjustment layers, and then that's it. And we're done with this whole chapter. Yay. That's awesome. I know. It's actually pretty cool because it's color stuff. So speed grade is what it used to be called. That's what's in your book, but it's gone now and it's called Lumetri Color. So we can see up here, it's called Lumetri Color, and there's all these different things that we can do in it. So the presets that come in here are looks that you might want to apply without going through all these different numbers and settings. Just this is a look I like. I think that's cool. Think about like some horror films, how they all kind of have a certain look or color desaturated from them or something. So these are all presets that exist in here. How do you apply an effect to an entire sequence? Could you do that? You could, but it's very inefficient. I mean, clip by clip is inefficient. Applying it to the whole sequence is a lot more efficient. Then if you change your mind, it's 1 click versus you applied it to 20 different clips. It's 20 different changes. So how we're going to work with that is an adjustment layer. Just like in Photoshop, when we do an adjustment layer above our picture, we can mask out where it appears and where it doesn't appear, or how we use it. So we're going to apply an adjustment layer in our timeline. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do is I'm going to make my timeline area bigger, and I'm going to find a way to make all these a lot more viewer friendly. I need to be able to see up to the video 5 track. So video, I hate this when it gets all messed up here. Come on. So I have video 1, video 2, video 3, video 4. What's on video 4 track? Anybody remember? Or After Effects are on that track. So video 5 should be empty, and if you don't have it, do you guys have it? Okay, good. So we're going to make a new one. Go to your project panel, click that so that it's active, and you have the blue box around your project panel. And then we're going to go up to our top menu, and we're going to choose File, New Adjustment Layer. So File, New...
Sorry. What are we selecting?
Nothing.
Okay, so just file.
Yep, File. You're in your project panel. Make sure that's the highlighted part. You're in your timeline right now. In your project panel, do a File, New Adjustment Layer. And a pop-up says, okay, how big should this be? And 1920 by 1080 is the default of our entire movie, so that's all good, and we just say, okay. And we see it show up as an asset in our project panel, right? Mine happens to be in the R3D folder because that's just what I had twirled open. Not that that's necessarily where it should be, but that's what happened. So here's the adjustment layer. In our timeline, go back to that, select your timeline, and scrub your playhead to the beginning. So make sure you're at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And from here, we're going to take this adjustment layer that's over in our project panel. We're going to select it, and we're going to drag it into the timeline on video track 5. So drag it out, plop it on video track 5, right where our playhead starts at the beginning of the movie. How long is the duration of this right now, approximately?
Yeah.
5, 6 seconds, somewhere in there?
It's like 4.5.
Yeah. Whatever it is, it's not the length of our whole movie, obviously, so that's not quite what we want it to be. We want it to be the same duration as our sequence, and so we're going to select the out point and we're going to drag it to the right so that it snaps to the out point in your last clip. I want to see where that is. I'm going to move my playhead there. So we want to snap to the last thing, which happens to be prod sweeping confetti. So I'm going to zoom in to make sure that's what it is. And the end of that for me is 3:08:10. You guys get that? Okay. Keep your playhead there, and then I would zoom out on your timeline so you can see the whole thing. That's a little too small. And then this video 5, the adjustment layer that you have in the video 5 track, select it, and then grab the back end of it. I need to zoom in a little bit more. And we are going to drag it all the way out to where our playhead ends so that it, oops, what did I just do? Oh, that is right. Okay. So it's now the whole duration. Adjustment layers are invisible. There's nothing on it right now. We haven't told it to do anything. But as a for example, if we drag an adjustment of make black and white to that, what's it going to do? Everything underneath it, think of it as a stack like in Photoshop, everything underneath it is going to have that adjustment applied to it, and it's going to be the whole duration. So maybe that's your goal, but probably not. Maybe just 1 or 2 clips you want to colorize a certain way. So then we end up cutting this and saying, do it here, do it here, do it here, or do whatever. So we make little chunks above the clips, and we drag out the special effect that we want to have applying to them. All right, so in our book, it's a little off again. It says, next we're going to apply a Lumetri look. So Shift 7 to get the effects panel, or if you have it down here, yeah, I'm just going to do a Shift 7. Here's our effects panel again, and we see a bunch of different folders. There used to only be 4, now we have more. From here, we're going to twirl open the Lumetri looks, and we now have cinematic, film stock, monochrome, speed looks, and technical. And if you need to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see the samples that they're showing you, as you click on or twirl open cinematic, you can see 2-strip, Cinespace, faded film. These are all some looks that are pre-built for us, and they kind of show you a preview. So that's what's in cinematic. If you look at film stock, we have what Fujifilm would look like or Kodak would look like if that's what you shot with. In monochrome, we have different faded film looks, normal contrast, whatever. Speed looks, we have 2 folders. Under cameras, we have a bunch of different cameras, and I'm actually going to come back to that one, so I'm just going to twirl it shut. And then we have universal. And if you look at these, like Blue Steel, isn't that from one of the Zoolander show movies? Yeah. Blue Steel, that look he gave, that cracks me up. But it gives a look. So there's all these different colorations of looks that you could apply, and you do get a preview, which is helpful. And then the final one, I'm going to twirl that shut under technical, full to, or legal to full range, and then different bits. So the stuff that we're going to play with, because it's different than what our book talks about, what they wanted us to do was find one that's kind of a desaturated look. So we were going to have all of the interview clips, everything but the raw clips, we're going to have like a desaturated older look to them. The one that they talk about in the book does not exist. We can't get to it anymore. So you can do anything you want just to practice, but the one that I found that's sort of okay is under speed looks and under cameras. I went to the Canon 7D, and I found all of these speed looks specific to this one. And the one that I thought kind of worked, sort of, was SL Clean Punch HDR.
What's called the Canon 70? Is that the stuff that's actually in the camera?
I think it knows the file formats that the 7D records. It works best with them in colors. Yeah. So this one, as you can kind of see it, it's a little desaturated. Can you see that over here, how the color chips are a little desaturated? So that's kind of the best guess I could get to this one. Huh? Who knows? I have no idea. I mean, this is a whole career field and a 2-year program at schools and a 4-year program in film school, and I don't even know. We're scratching the surface here. So take our playhead in the timeline to the point of Heidi talking, which is at about 39. I guess that's inside of Heidi somewhere. So inside of the Heidi clip, okay, we're not sending it to speed grade, so a bunch of these next things are not what we want at all. So I'm going to keep going in our book. Keep going, shift, return, do that, blah, blah, blah. All right, we're just going to do it the easy way. We're going to take this clean punch HDR and we're going to drag it onto our adjustment layer. And that's going to add that version to everything. Can you see how the colors have changed a little? If not, do a undo or look at it up here in your effect control panel and pull out another option. Just experiment with it a little bit and see what kind of different looks you get. This is Clean Punch Noir. I don't know what that one is. Noir. So practice by picking one, dragging it out onto your adjustment layer. Notice it shows up the minute you do that up here. So if you ever forget what it was, it's right there. I chose this last time, Metri Color, SL Blue Gold, and 70. And there's more options within here that you could tweak. But you can pull out, like I see Sam's got it in black and white, right? So that's kind of cool. So if this is the effect that you wanted, I'm going to jump ahead to page 330. Maybe we don't want that for the whole darn movie. Maybe we just want that for a couple of clips. So what do you guys remember about how we would do that? How would we affect this? Yep. We would put our playhead where we want it. We would take the razor tool and cut it. We would take our playhead ahead to where it ends, cut it, and then we would delete the effect above the stuff we don't want it showing. We would add it where we want it. So you could go through and make one scene black and white, one scene, I don't know what you had on there, Sam, but that was cool. It was really bright. I don't know what effect it is. Look up in the,
Oh, and this one.
and the top thing will tell you. About halfway down, I think.
SL Clean Punch HDR.
Clean Punch HDR. So these are all different presets, and I'm guessing that you can buy these online just like you can buy brushes and other assets that you can download. There's probably a bunch of different presets out there. So you can have kind of some fun with this. You can dig through here, but what I'd like you to do is apply one, and then let's practice cutting it out. Let's say we don't want this on the Heidi clip. So we would get our playhead to the beginning of Heidi, and we would go with our select tool first to make sure we're in the adjustment layer up here, and then we would take the razor, and we would, on that layer, on layer 5, we would cut. Then we would move our playhead to where Heidi ends, and we would make another razor cut. And then with our selection tool, we would just pick this chunk that's above Heidi, and we would hit delete. And now that adjustment doesn't affect Heidi. What if you wanted to put a different adjustment on Heidi? You could pull in, if you wanted to, another track up here, add a thing for Heidi, cut it down to just that size, and then if you wanted to, push it down into that hole. Okay, that's it. Those are the color crash course. I think the most important thing from here, if you want to save it, is knowing that you can do the white balance and the brightening, or you could actually darken a shot that was too bright. So in this example, we went and did that white, and we slid it over from 255, we pulled it back to like 200. If your image was too bright, you could take the black slider and pull it to the right to beef up the blacks. And then all these different color effects, all you need to do is make an adjustment layer and then drag those onto the adjustment layer. You could make an adjustment layer, and remember how it came in as like 6 seconds only? We could have made it 4 seconds, pulled it over Heidi, trimmed it down to what we wanted it to be exactly, dragged out the thing that we want on Heidi only. We could make another one and make it 6 seconds and drag it out over Philip and make Philip's clip behave a different way. All good? Okay. That, my friends, is the end of the sermon. So,